Thank you very much for being here. Secretary Mattis, last October before the Senate Armed Services Committee, you stated that, quote, "it is in our national security interest to remain in the JCPOA or Iran nuclear deal." Do you still believe that remaining in the JCPOA is within U.S. national security interests?
I think it needs to be fixed, Congressman.
I'm asking if it remains in our interest to stay within the deal, in our national security interests.
If it is fixed, yes, sir.
But not without it being fixed. What do you intend to recommend to President Trump approaching the May 12th sanctions deadline?
Right. We are working on what needs to be fixed in it. We are also working with our allies in very close consultation with our European allies on this. There are three areas. This is not an area because it's pre-decisional that I want to go into detail here. But if those three areas are addressed, then it perhaps can be saved.
And otherwise, you think we should pull out?
I'm not willing to say that until I see how much of it can be saved. I mean, this is not I think it's not an easily binary situation,
and yet
depending on our success
right, but
with the European allies. If we can fix most of it, will that make it sufficient? I don't know right now.
The problem, Mr. Secretary, is the decision to stay in or pull out is ultimately a binary decision.
Right.
Mr. Chairman, your deputy, General Paul Selva, testified last July that based on the evidence that's been presented to the intelligence community, it appears that Iran is in compliance with the rules that were laid out in the JCPOA. And since that time, the IAEA has continued to affirm Iran's compliance. In your assessment and in the assessment of the intelligence community, is Iran still in compliance with the terms of the deal?
Congressman, I'll caveat my statement by saying I haven't seen a recent report. I'm not aware of any violations.
What does the joint staff plan to recommend to the President about staying in the Iran nuclear deal?
Yeah, Congressman, I can't share that with you right now. I mean, I think from my perspective, we want to make sure that all of Iran's malign activity is addressed. Nuclear activity, cyber activity, missile activity, maritime threats. And so we have a framework right now that addresses the nuclear piece. It's been deemed to be unsatisfactory. What we need to come out of is a diplomatic and a legal framework within which to manage the nuclear threat that Iran poses.
Mr. Chairman, how do you expect North Korea to believe that we will adhere to a deal if we are so willing to pull out of a deal that the United States of America signed with Iran on the same subject?
Well, I understand your question, Congressman, but it certainly won't be up to me to decide whether to pull out of the deal or not. That's ultimately going to be a political decision.
I understand, Mr. Chairman, but what I'm asking you is how do we expect North Korea to believe in a deal if we're so willing to pull out of our immediate past nuclear deal?
No, I understand it, but I'm not trying to be argumentative, but you're speculating that we will pull out, and then you're asking me to determine what the action would be of North Korea.
Yes, sir.
I can't do that.
All right, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Secretary, we've discussed before the advent of artificial intelligence and its implications for our military, and you brought it up in your opening testimony. China has made a clear commitment to meet U.S. capability in artificial intelligence by 2020 and then exceed it by 2030. Who owns U.S. research and development in artificial intelligence bureaucratically?
Right now, it's our new Undersecretary of Research and Engineering, Michael Griffith, and I would tell you that we're looking at a joint office where we would concentrate all of DOD's efforts. Since we have a number of AI efforts underway right now, we're looking at pulling them all together.
So, Mr. Secretary, is it just within DOD? Is there any government-wide effort on artificial intelligence, or does it just exist? Is the owner essentially Department of Defense?
I can only speak to my portfolio on it. I'll get back to you with the broader, answering the broader question. But in terms of the defense of America, obviously, I'm primary. I know that also the CIA works on this issue.
Mr. Secretary, a quick question on Syria. When I served under you in Iraq, you made it very clear what our mission was. In fact, you made it clear what we had to accomplish before we came home. What do the troops in Syria, the over 2,000 Americans risking their lives every day, have to accomplish in Syria before they can come home?
I think both administrations, the last one and the current one, said we are going to take ISIS down so they do not have a physical caliphate, and they're shattered in terms of an aura of invincibility that attracts funding and recruiting. So that remains the same at this time, Congressman.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Byrne.